that together. And I'm trying to get it, but I'm not stirring, right? I'm sort of tossing. Choose your fork, tamp it all down a little bit. Now you're going to deftly with the fork. You want everything covered. You see, it's lovely, toasty brown. The house smells amazing. Hey, it's Greg here at MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make apple crisp, but I have a different way of making it than a lot of people. You know, you go to someone's house and they make an apple crisp, or maybe someone brings an apple crisp over and they got a crisp and they got this wet apple mess on the bottom. I like to have a nice chewy crust on the bottom and a nice crumbly, crunchy crust on the top, and then the apples in between. That's how I do it, and I'm going to show you how I do it right now. Okay, so first off, we have to do the apples. I've already cut some of them up here. I just wanted to show how to do this because I think this is the most intimidating part of making an apple crisp, is preparing all of the apples. So we got an apple peeler, we got a paring knife, and this is one of those things, it's a skill. You get good at it with practice. I just did these with my daughter, and I did 3 while she did 1. Not because I'm awesome, because she's inexperienced. This doesn't take long to do. There's lots of different ways to do it. Some people like to do this, bring it in a bit closer here, so zoom right in. A lot of people like to do this, try to get up one continual piece. Really, I think that takes more time. If you do the top and you do the bottom, that way you can get the blade right in there underneath it like that, right? You can get the blade in there. Then you're done. Gouge out any weird looking stuff. Okay, get that little bit. That's done. Now we got to cut this up. No big deal. Cut it in half again. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do this. This is what I recommend. Take a paring knife, choke up on the blade, get under there like that, underneath, and pop that out. Underneath. Like that. I like to see how fast I can do it without cutting myself. Now I'm using the chef's knife because it's faster than doing this with a paring knife. So each one of these, I'm going to cut it in fingers like that, using proper technique with my knife, right? In such a way where I can't cut my fingers off, right? Because I got the fingertips tucked back behind my knuckles and my thumb tucked back behind my knuckles. So I'm totally safe. Do it blindfolded. But I'm also holding it down, and I'm just moving the knife back. Also, great thing about a chef's knife, helps you pick everything up. All right, so let's see how quickly we can do this now. I'll do another one slowly so you can see the technique. Those that want to learn these things. Okay, a little piece of peel there to get. Okay, now let's try to go a little faster. No cutting ourselves. I'm cutting these into roughly, 1 centimeter thick. What's that, like a 1/4 inch, give or take, 3/8 of an inch. Doesn't have to be perfect. It'll all work itself out in the crisp. But I find the smaller pieces tends to work better. You don't want whole chunks of apple. Okay, so now we got that. All we need to do to this is we're going to add about 1/4 of a lemon. I'm just running it over my hands in case there's any seeds. You don't need the lemon. Some recipes call for lemon, some don't. Really, I think the apple should have a certain tartness. So I like to add the lemon because it gives the apple tartness. If the apple is already very tart, it depends on the variety, you don't need the lemon. Okay, so it's just 1/4 of a lemon. Then we need to add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Just any old sugar, just white sugar is fine. All right. And we just toss that together. And that's the filling. Oh, and I forgot today because I'm filming, but before you start any of this, turn your oven on. What should the oven setting be? 375. All right, 375. That's what we need. Okay, the apples are all ready. I guess I haven't discussed the ingredients, so I might as well do that right now. For this recipe, just bring it over here. You're gonna need 4 or 5 apples like I just cut up. You're gonna need some salt, about 1/2 tablespoon of salt, You're gonna need about half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a cup and a half of oatmeal, a cup of brown sugar, and a cup of flour, and some butter, half a cup of butter or margarine or whatever you got. All right, and yeah, again, about 4 or 5 apples depending on their size. I think the recipe calls for 4 to 5 cups of chopped apple. I always find that it's about 5 apples. I usually use 5 big fat apples or 6 sort of normal mid apples, or maybe 7 pathetic little scrawny apples. Okay, you just toss that around. That's ready. Okay, now we're gonna make the filling. Not the filling, no. The crumb. Yes, we're making the crumb. Okay. So, what do we need here? A lot of recipes. Oh, look at that. There's a half cup in the bag. Anyway, we need. A lot of recipes just call for 1 cup of oats. I'm using. These are called like quick oats. These are like the ones that are probably like really, serious health food people don't use these ones because they're really soft and fluffy and make a really soft porridge, but they cook really fast and we all like them. It cooks in 1.5 minutes. I find I really like these. Use whatever you got, all right? Anyway, a cup and a half of those. Okay, that's done. And then we need a cup of brown sugar, or thereabouts. You can get. Again, this is not, we are baking, but this is not like a cake where you have to precision matters. So I can just guesstimate. That's about a cup. Okay. Brown sugar, very important. Brown sugar over. You just won't get the right flavor with white sugar. We need a cup of flour. And then we're going to our spices and salt. So we need a teaspoon of cinnamon. You can go more. This is kind of like a heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'm going for half a teaspoon of nutmeg. And half a teaspoon of salt. Okay, now before we add the butter, we're going to combine all of this with a fork and a knife. So the great thing about doing it this way is that when everything is the same color, you've mixed it thoroughly. You can use the fork. The brown sugar clumps up a little bit, so you can use the fork to break up those chunks of brown sugar. You notice I didn't sift my flour. That's a good thing to do if you've got lumpy flour. I'm fairly confident that my flour is not lumpy, and I also just don't care. So. That's one of the things they teach you to do in baking class, and I'm sure for some things that really matters, but for this it doesn't. Okay, main thing here is you're combining everything, and you're getting those little brown sugar clumps worked out. See one right there. Doesn't take long. You got a knife, because when we're going to start adding the butter, we'll use this to clean the fork out. I think that's good enough there. Now we're going to add our butter. Recipe calls for half a cup of butter. I'm using a kind of dairy-free margarine, but using butter, I guarantee tastes better. So if you got butter and you like butter, go with butter. But anyway, this will be fine. Okay, so now this is called cutting it in. So we're just...
I'm going to hold the bowl.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Got my daughter here with the camera. All right, so we're just working this in. We're cutting the fat into tiny little pieces. And we're just using the knife and fork to do that. You can do this with your hands, and I have. It's a bit messy, but it works. There's pastry tools you can use for this, but they don't work well with the oats. They work better with, there's a cutting tool you can use for pastry that works just with flour. Now the oats tends to clog it all up, and it's just irritating. And you can get by just fine with a fork and a knife. That's what I use. I'm not using this to I don't have a special tool for this. This is how I do this. And I make this, I don't know, I wouldn't say I make it often, but I make it, maybe 4 times a year or something like that. I don't know how often I make it. I'm making it today because I had one apple that was starting to go off. The skin was not crisp anymore. So perfectly fine way to use up apples that are sort of past their prime. For whatever reason, no one's eating them, or maybe they weren't particularly good apples. A good hand apple, but perfectly fine for baking. A lot of apples can be like that. All right, I'd say you can see that it all looks kind of uniform. As I'm mixing this, I'm just examining it for clumps and irregularities, and I'm trying to get it, but I'm not stirring, right? I'm sort of tossing and squishing. That's when you're kind of squishing with the fork, and then tossing it up, right? And with the knife, I'm just clearing off the fork from time to time, and not cutting my daughter's thumb off. All right, so that's all we got to do. That's the crumb. All right. The next step is to grease a pan. This is a 9-inch by 9-inch pan. I don't know what that is in centimeters, roughly. Let's say 20 cm by 20 cm. It's easy enough to Google to translate the centimeters to inches and inches to centimeters. It's a 9 by 9 pan. This is an old pan that I got at a used, a place that sells used stuff. Some of the best stuff I have in my kitchen when it comes to pans are these old school steel pans. No Teflon, no nothing like that, no glass, Pyrex or whatever, just a steel pan that you grease gets the best result, especially when they start to get blackened and what's that called? Patinaed like this one is. All right, now we're gonna take about half of our crumb, just eyeballing it, okay? Should be enough to cover the bottom with a good layer, but don't shortchange yourself, because you want a nice crumb on top as well. But that bottom is also important. So once you've got that, just use your fork to tamp it all down a little bit. It'll make a better bottom crust if you do that. You want that chewy, almost like a granola bar. You have a chewy bottom and a soft middle and a crunchy top. Right? You're sort of getting every glorious texture you can imagine. And the top and the bottom are kind of sweet, and then you've got the tang and acidity of the apple in the middle. So now we add our apple. Smells good. I'm sure some apples are better for this than others. There's apples that are sort of famous for being good baking apples. This is fine. And some people might question why I added the sugar to this. You don't need to, but adding the sugar to the fill and tossing it around, it really helps the fill make like a jam, right? It helps the fill come together and stick together and make a proper fill. You can get by without it. But it does. So you're not just adding the sugar for sweetness. That's really not necessary. You're more adding it for what it does physically. It helps stick it all together. You want a nice cohesive filling. Okay, now I put our crumb on the top. Hopefully we've got enough to cover. You should have a nice mountain like that. Now you're going to deftly, with the fork, you want everything covered. I might have gone too heavy on the bottom. This should still be fine. So you just don't use your fingers and don't smush it. You want the top crust light, right? Light and crunchy. You're not going to push this down. It just cooks better. It'll fall down as it cooks. That's about right. Good. This is all ready to go in the oven, and the oven is preheated to 375. The instructions say 375 for 50 minutes. That's what we're going to do. All right, so we're going in. Got about a middle rack position. The crisp in the middle of the middle rack. We'll see you in 50 minutes. 5-0. so it's been 50 minutes. Time to take this thing out of the oven. You see it's lovely, toasty brown. The house smells amazing. So the temptation is to cut into this right now and have it when it's hot and that sort of thing. But I recommend waiting a couple hours before you do that. This all needs to come together and coalesce so that it doesn't fall apart. If you try to cut into this right now and get it out of the pan, it's going to fall apart. If you wait an hour or two, this will come out in nice, solid pieces. It'll have that wonderful chewy texture on the bottom and the crumbly, crunchy texture on the top, and the soft, whatever you call that, the soft, appley goodness in the center. So we can't try this right now. We're going to try it in a couple hours after supper. So I'll be back with you then when we have a little piece of this and see what it tastes like. But it looks good, it smells good, the whole house smells great, and this is ready. Okay, so it's been a couple hours. We just ate a delicious meal and everybody's waiting for dessert. So I'm going to cut into this. Bring the camera in close so we can see this coming out. So I'll just measure this off. Something reasonable. You can see it going through that bottom crust like that. It's always hard to get the corner piece out. Let's see if we can get it out in one piece. There we go. There we go. All right, good. Okay, now let me show you what we got here. So we got the crust, the filling. Down here is that little chewy granola bar like bottom crust. All right, so let's cut into it. All right, we've had a few technical difficulties with the camera. I've already cut into this thing a few times, but the camera keeps crapping out. But anyway, this is what we got. You know, a nice crumb on the top, a nice chewy crust on the bottom, and a nice soft middle. And this is my third time trying this, but the flavor is fantastic. And I hope you found this interesting. That's how you make a really good apple crisp. Great for Thanksgiving, etc. If you like this, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.